Okay, should we make a start? What do you say?
Yep.
Yes? All right, welcome everybody. Can I just check everybody can hear me? Yes?
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
All right, welcome everyone. I know we have people from around the world. Um, so first of all, thank you for being here. I want to begin by thanking you all for joining us, and first of all, our panelists and our audience today, and obviously a very special thank you to Shari Petti for sharing her work with us, bringing Mass and Movies to London, and creating this really important opportunity to talk about Carnival film and the power of cultural storytelling. All right. So let me introduce myself first of all. My name is Rosa Codina. I'm a senior lecturer in tourism and events management here at Oxford Brookes University. I research and I teach about events, festivals, cultural heritage, and the social value of events and tourism. And it's a pleasure to be able to moderate today's roundtable. So just to introduce or just to summarize briefly today's event or format, we'll have around an hour, hour and a half together to discuss mass and movies and the wider cultural significance of Carnival on screen. So what I wanted to do first of all is to let all our panelists first of all introduce themselves and then move on to a discussion, starting with Shari, to get her to introduce her work, uh, particularly her work around Carnival, mass and movies and screen. And then to do just a couple of questions for our panelists to discuss. Okay, so can I just start with you, Shari, if you want to introduce yourself briefly, and then I'll ask the rest of the panelists to introduce themselves.
Hello, good morning or afternoon, wherever you may be at the moment. I'm Shari Petti. I'm a filmmaker from Trinidad and Tobago. And today we're going to be discussing Mass and Movies, which is a screening series I developed over the past couple years. And it usually would include a selection of work that I've created, in particular, a series called Mass Prep about traditional mass characters in Trinidad and Tobago. So at the moment, I have 7 episodes, and each episode highlights a different traditional mass character. And traditional mass is like rooted in our very early origins. So, different from what you may typically see regular, like I guess on the big screen, or your overall view of Carnival. If you might not be inside of Trinidad, you might see a lot of beads and feathers. But traditional mass is also a major part of our history and our culture. And then also, some narrative films as well. And I always try to include some kind of archival work. So previously, I would have shown King Carnival, and in the most recent installation of Mass and Movies, I showed Carnival Fantastique, which is a film by Edric Connor, and well, King Carnival is by Horace Ove. So two very excellent, filmmakers from Trinidad and Tobago. They're no longer alive, but their work still, lives on with us. And, in November, we had Mass and Movies at the Rio Cinema, and this was the lovely team who was a part of the screenings. So we get to learn about them as well. Very grateful that I had this kind of support to make this happen for real.
Thank you, Shari. Rosie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Rosie Greatorex. It's lovely to be here this afternoon because this is I think it was my favourite event that we did last year. I'm the executive director of the Rio Cinema in Dalston in Hackney. And I also put our film programme together. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Corrina?
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me along here. My name is Corrina. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a culture lead here for the London Borough of Hackney. And what that means is that I look after the cultural programmes, which are Windrush, where we have a Windrush Festival every June. We also have Black History 365 programme, and I also look after the Carnival programme here in the borough. So Sherry's work aligns so beautifully with all my portfolio. I'm also a film critic, and I had the pleasure of programming Sherry's work in my former life as a film programmer, as part of my Feminist Film Festival many years ago. So it's really nice to be working with you here again. I'll pass over to Marva, who I just want to make sure that there's a proper introduction here from one of Hackney's most impressive carnival groups that has been so integral to the quality of work that we have here in Hackney for when we support carnival arts in Hackney. So Marva, thank you, but over to you.
Thank you for the feedback and the invite. Yes, I'm Marva. I am a carnival artist, cultural producer, and community leader and founder and artistic director of Tropical Arts Carnival Group, an award-winning carnival arts organisation based in Hackney, East London. So the backdrop at the behind is just somewhere in Hackney. Yes. I have extensive experience in carnival art, community engagement, and cultural events productions. I've been committed to sustaining and developing carnival traditions across Hackney and beyond for many years. My work centres on celebrating and preserving African Caribbean heritage through costume design, music, movement, and large-scale public celebrations. Through Tropical Arts, I've led design and delivery of vibrant carnival presentations while mentoring emerging artists and creating creative opportunities for young people and local communities. My practice combines artistic excellence, thank you, with social impact. I've worked collaboratively with local authorities, schools, youth groups, and cultural partners to deliver workshops, parade, community-led events and promote inclusion, cultural pride, and intergenerational participation. Thank you.
Thank you, Marva. That was great. Thank you all of our panelists for introducing yourselves. So now I wanted to move on to the roundtable discussion. Also, just before we start, just wanted to let our audience know we will have time for audience questions after the panel discussion. So if you have some questions, please save them for the latter part of the event, but we will love to hear from the audience as well. Okay, so to begin with, Shari, I wanted to start with you. If you could talk a little bit about what inspired you to create this series, and also from your perspective, what was distinctive about the Rio event as well?
Mm-hmm. So for me, what sparked the idea for this series is actually I was making a lot of work and I didn't really show it in a public space yet. So for me, mass prep, I was genuinely intrigued by traditional mass. I didn't feel like I had enough information about it. So I started doing my own research, and through the making and collaborating with these artists, I, was able to develop a series that I guess, thoroughly gave us an insight on how these traditional mask makers spend their time, how they're able to construct and whatever rituals they may have involved in their practice, seeing them construct a costume for the entire year and then actually seeing them on the road, as opposed to, the end result, which is what we usually see. We mainly just see them on the road. So for me, some of that information, I was Googling it, but I wasn't able to find any kind of proper documentation of the prep process. And, I was reading articles and journals as well. And same thing, yes, I have information about, the origins, I have information about, how it's portrayed, but I didn't have information about, how do we, make this costume, or how do we manifest this character? How do I practice, to become proficient, or, someone who's very a reputable artist in the traditional mass field. So that was the initial spark for the creation of the work. And then also I was, making other work related to Carnival, not intentionally. I have work that's not related to Carnival. I've had work that had to do with hair, had work to do with, young people, addressing their social issues in their community. But during the past couple of years, I had a lot of work related to Carnival in particular, and I didn't really have a space to show it publicly. I also would have put a couple of clips online or show one episode online, which is what I did with the first mass prep episode. But then eventually, that response, people started responding to it online, and I got a grant from One World Media where I spent a fellowship with them, actually. I spent a year developing my second episode, learning how to make documentaries. I mean, besides learning how to make it in school, learning how to, present in terms of journalism and ethics and paperwork, and really thoroughly packaging your work and how to run a company. They also taught me that and connecting with mentors. And at the end of that time, I had all this work, and I decided, you know what, maybe I should start showing it publicly. So that's kind of where it started. So when I showed it publicly the first time, for me, I wanted to have an event that also was more than just you coming to watch a film. It's more like an experience. So, for me, the kind of music that is played is important. I didn't just want to have a DJ playing. For me, the kind of music that is played is important, connecting it to the music that you could find in the work, and music that people might not always ingest or might be deep in the crates that we could dig back up again. That's the kind of experience that I wanted to introduce people to, or reintroduce people to our music, and reintroduce people to the way that we could, really promote our space and culture. And, along with the music, the kind of energy, the kind of vibe. Sometimes I have drummers. This last master movies, I had a limbo dancer, limbo dancers and moko jumbies, really, bringing in the carnival space along with the screening. So, I really always wanted it to be a very interactive kind of experience.
That's really interesting to hear about that combination. And I wanted to ask you, Shari, I mean, did you find that also this kind of format in some way also ignited discussions that maybe were different than just a typical carnival screening?
What's interesting, and I even had this conversation just 2 days ago with a friend of mine, about 3 or 4 people over the past couple of weeks have told me, especially for this Master movies and the last one I did, which happened in the middle of the carnival season. They found it was so endearing that I had a carnival screening in the middle of everybody's partying and stuff. And I'm like, I feel like that's an obvious thing to do. Some people might not always want to party. For example, me, I'm not the biggest party. I would still go to a party, but I want to see and I want to learn. So I would like to go to exhibitions. I would want to go to screenings. And when I travel, even when I'm in London, the last time I spent Notting Hill Carnival, I went to about 4 carnival screenings. And I went to a lot of exhibitions in terms of photography and paintings, and I feel that was an experience that I treasured a lot, because I got to learn a lot about Notting Hill Carnival, and from watching your documentaries, something that I feel like I didn't have as much exposure to, besides what I could find on YouTube, besides what I could find, online. But, when I'm in a space where it's curated, they want this information to be brought to you in a specific kind of way, I feel like, that was an experience that I valued. So, even though I've shown work in Trinidad before, I got a lot of inspiration, even just from that, from seeing how intrigued people were by Notting Hill Carnival itself. But for me, I'm in Trinidad, and for me, even a lot of Trinidadians still might not be as in tune, or might not be as knowledgeable about how these characters work or how our carnival space works. And, fill in the gaps for myself help me, hopefully fill in the gaps for other people too. Because whatever I'm not finding and I present it to you, now you find something that I wasn't finding. And now we have a whole new resource or archive of work. And that's to say that I'm the first person to ever document traditional mass. I'm just saying that, while I was researching, I just couldn't find the work. Oh, so maybe people made it and they have it in their archives, or it's created, but it's geo-blocked, which was the reality for me. When I first tried to watch Carnival Fantastic for the past couple of years, I couldn't find it because it was geo-blocked to London. But when I visited London, I was able to see it, and I'm like, yes, I need to find how to bring this to Trinidad. So, those are the kind of experiences I've been having. And well, in terms of the Rio experience, mine, for me, that was one of the biggest achievements I've had, for my career. I feel like, being able to show in a movie theater outside of my country, and even though I recently showed massive movies at Movie Town here, and I've shown one-off films in movie theaters in my countries, I've never done it as an individual. I've also done it as a collective. As an individual, I've done a lot of community screenings and screenings where I could bring people in and set up my screen, but not a movie theater. So the fact that I showed at a movie theater outside of my country before my own, for myself, really, it put a lot into perspective for me, and made me even more confident in, pushing harder to get this kind of work out there, and to, even more confidence in myself and in the people that I have that, help me do what I do. So, and also the fact that the work was just as well received as it was in Trinidad. It's not like, they came and it's like, what is this culture? I don't understand this. It's more like, oh, These are artists just like any other artist in the world. They just happen to be from the Caribbean and involved in this main art that happened to historically impact their space. So, I feel like people still very much treasured it and learned a lot of about our country that they didn't know before, or were introduced to work that they never knew anything of before, like King Carnival. So yes, also, feel like that Rio experience put give me a lot to think about and put a lot into perspective for what I can do further, or what I can do in the future, how I could go about doing screenings, like, more community collaborations. It doesn't have to just be me alone doing every single thing. The more that you collaborate with people who already know their space and community, they know how to bring an audience, they know the kind of people that may be intrigued by it, and they also know how to structure an event where people would, in that space or culture would appreciate the offerings.
Thank you, Shari. And I agree. I think that in a sense, the bringing the series to London, what it showed to you is also how it translates to other audiences, and that it does translate in different ways. I guess what I wanted to also ask our other panelists is, from their perspective, what was distinctive about Shari's work and the screening in London, and if there was any key takeaway for you about the value of using screenings and maybe community collaborations to showcase this type of work.
Marva, did you want to go first?
Marva, you're muted.
I felt the screening was truly inspirational. Even though we've been doing Carnival like for 25 years, on that day, I learned a lot of new ideas, experience, traditions. Sometimes it was in the background, but having that screening and seeing the development of the art form, the traditional mass, what that was all about, was so important, because we've lost it here in London.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get enough opportunities to hear the stories, what makes mass, and how it can transform and be a better practice educationally. And also we need to bring it back. And it was very nice to be able to sit down and watch something new. To me, it felt it was a new experience. I've heard about it, but I've never seen it, as old as I am. So yeah.
Thank you, Marva. Corrina, Rosie.
I'd like to just talk about how important I think that the screening was, and how sumptuous and intricate and personal and beautiful Shari's work is, and what it has given. It's given an extra layer of storytelling to Carnival. Here in London, most of us only go to the event itself. If you're lucky enough to go to Notting Hill or any of the carnival events that we've done over the years, or somewhere like Luton, who also has a big carnival, you go to the event, you feel the vibe, you enjoy yourself. But something like the work that Shari and Martha does here in Hackney is look at the lead up and appreciate the work, oh my God, the actual day. And it's more than just the graft, it's the celebration of culture, it's the coming together, it's the community cohesion, and what I got from it personally as well. And I think it's so beautiful, Marva, what you were saying about the fact that even you learned something, as you're a complete expert in your field. And I think that's what's so beautiful about the work, is that it shows the complexity and the diversity within the cultures of Carnival. And there isn't just one particular way to talk about Carnival. There are different islands, and here in Hackney we have so many different ways of celebrating it, across our Para Carnival to Far East Asian Carnival, and we all come together when we can. But I'm a big advocate for the big screen experience. It's really lovely to say, Shari, about how wonderful it was to have it at the Rio Cinema. And we love having the Rio Cinema here in Hackney, because it has always made space for the important voices that make Hackney as special as it is. And it's always been a community cinema that opens its doors to this kind of positive representation, to increase appreciation for one another's cultures, to, the whole day was filled with workshops with young people facilitated by Marva and Tropical Isles. Young people got to learn from the experts. And then there was food in the foyer. I think, I can't remember exactly what the food was, but I know it was like on point.
Pilau, I think, was Trini food.
Yeah, the food was there, and these are all important elements to sharing one another's cultures, and that's what we do here in Hackney as much as we can. And thank you, Shari, for bringing the films here to let us do that, and thank you to Rosie for allowing, for opening the doors once again at the Rio to allow us to enjoy this kind of work on that truly visceral level.
Thank you, Corrina. Rosie, do you want to share your
Thank you,
thoughts?
Corrina. Yeah. I'll just, I just want to say again, like for me, this was my favorite Rio event of 2025. And to put that in context, we do several really great events every week. We work with many different audiences, many guest curators. We host a lot of festivals. And we often have programming responses to the archive at the Rio. But for me, this just kind of hit the magic spot of like we're presenting work with an international profile, Shari's films, work that I personally really love. We're also working with an incredible Hackney icon, Marva, Tropical Isles, that grounds us in our community and our heritage. And it was an intergenerational celebration. It just felt really good. And the time and the care that Hannah put into producing the event and the way she left room for things to develop or be fluid, and the amount of work that everybody put in to make sure there was time to figure out the shape of an event, even though we were working with several partners. It's emotional labor, right? And it's the preparation and it's the work. And that's also what these films are about. It's when you're curating, it's about the checking in and the keeping everyone in the loop. And it's what makes it so powerful on the day when that much care and love has gone into the thing that you're making. And I see that from a venue perspective, the difference it makes when somebody is holding all of that and has put all of that together, because it allows everybody else, the audience and the cinema staff, to relax and to really experience what's happening. I think the fact that it was intergenerational, the fact that we had this incredible kind of international, but also super local kind of dialogue, for me, it was just a really beautiful day. And I was really, really honored to have all of you at the venue. Please do it again.
Surely.
Yeah, it was wonderful.
I'll
Thank
just
you
add
so
on
much.
something that what was really beautiful was seeing how it resonated with audiences. At my
Yeah.
end of where I am, I get to see all the evaluation data. And there was, I will read out this little comment that I saw on Instagram, which I just thought was beautiful. And I just had to screenshot it because I thought this is exactly why we do the work that we do. And it says, if you're a filmmaker from Trinidad and Tobago, you will not be used to seeing your culture, hearing your accent, or recounting of stories you heard as a child on cinema screens, especially in a country that is not home. Seeing Tumoko Jumbi on screen in chilly grey London brought tears to my eyes, raised my paws and filled me with the warmth of home. Thank you for gifting this work to us. And that's just beautiful. So yeah, thank you. This is why we do
Thank
Thank you
you. That's really great to hear that the difference that it made. And one of the I guess one of the key takeaways for me was from especially in a way the witnessing in the documentaries or the series, the traditions, but also that these traditions, the history that is also being put forward by young people. It's young people that are still involved in making sure that these traditions are kept alive. And I can imagine that for diasporas, especially in the UK, that is something that maybe they would not they wouldn't have access to, that kind of knowledge and kind of uh, uh, storytelling in a way that is alive, right? Because you see it in your work, Shari, that this is something that is still evolving and that is very much part of today's world and today's kind of young people's experiences. They're kind of the ones that are building this and pushing the traditions forward. And for me, it was even kind of I didn't know that the borricade, for instance, was something that came from, I guess, Spanish, burrito. I'm originally from Peru. So to learn also the kind of role also that Venezuelans that are now also moving to Trinidad are playing in that keeping that tradition. And I just thought that was really interesting. And I guess I wanted to come back to that a little bit, to ask all of you, and especially you, Shari, first of all, from your perspective, what do you think currently are the most significant developments in Carnival locally and maybe transnationally? And second question, how do you see Carnival practices maybe continuing to maintain cultural meaning whilst at the same time, being dynamic and evolving?
I think in terms of the development, so there's development and then there's the becoming dynamic. Hopefully you remind me the second part if I don't remember. So I think in terms of the development, I mean, there's development happening in all different aspects of the carnival. I think, from a more contemporary or, the more commercial or outward facing aspect of things, there's a lot of development in events and how events are structured in general. And in terms of traditional, I feel like there's a lot of, as you mentioned, younger people coming up, a lot more training for people who want to be involved. So, I feel like over the past 5 years or so, I've seen a lot more Moko groups who, have training sessions, and not just in Trinidad. They fly to other parts of the world. They fly to Canada, they go to the UK, and they pass on that knowledge outside of Trinidad as well. And honestly, recently I've been like, even when I did my recent baby doll episode, I was in the archives. I was in the Heritage Library looking for some footage or photos of old baby doll, and I had a hard time finding any old footage, but I found this clip from, I think, maybe a newspaper that someone did an illustration, and at the beginning of that clip, and that's from that article was from 1997, so not too far away, right? That was, just recently. And it said, now extinct, the baby doll, da, 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 da. And I'm like, now extinct? This is 1997. And for me, I didn't even know so recently something like that character would have been pretty much not something you see on the streets as frequently. And, in recent times, there are like contemporary baby doll groups like Amanda McIntyre, who's in one of the episodes, and Helen Kennedy, who's also evolving the baby doll as opposed to just one baby doll. She has a whole, trolley of baby dolls, like a bunch of strollers attached together. Like I see a lot of like evolution of the traditional characters. And there's two parts. There are people who might be kind of against it in a way because, like for example, some of these characters have such a spiritual, it's very spiritual in the way that it is manifested, or the way that people, spend time nurturing it. So like there's a character called the Jab Jab with the whip. They fast and they, do a lot of prayers, and there's a major spiritual aspect to their mass. So hybrid forms of certain traditional characters may be controversial because, you really need to know what you're getting into before you just decide to, mix and match, if that makes sense. But for me, once there's reverence to the source, I'm personally for the evolution. I'm personally for the hybridization, because for me, most of it is hybrid anyway. It didn't really always come from here. It was, the French influence or the European influence and the African influence and the Indian influence and, the indigenous, all these things came together as a hybrid way to create new forms of what our traditional mass is. And even recently, like I'm doing a exchange in April in Italy. And while I'm doing research for that, I'm realizing, and even in France, I'm realizing that there are certain characters. And for example, in France, there's a city called because I'm going to butcher it. I'm not going to say it. But I realized that they had a Pierrot. And, obviously they have a Pierrot, they would have influenced our Pierrot or, certain aspects of our culture here. And, even though there's a negative they didn't necessarily come here in the most positive manner. Yeah, there was destruction of our society in the way that, the European came to our space. But also, I'm taking note of those little things that, kind of made us what we are, and, trying to make sense of it and, make use of it and trying to understand how these characters would develop, or besides just what I would read, like just seeing for myself, how these different spaces or people coming from different spaces create our own hybrid versions and not feeling like I need to, shun somebody because they decide to experiment a bit more with this thing, But as I said, just once there's reverence to it. So that's the evolution. Can you remind me of the second part of your question?
Yes, I mean it's similar. So how do you see carnival practices maintaining cultural meaning whilst also I guess evolving with times?
Yeah, I think, in terms of the evolution, I think the same idea of, understanding the history of what you want to get yourself involved in or what you're trying to understand a little bit more and, having respect for what has been done in the past as you move forward. And, for me, in terms of the evolution or the way that I would hope things evolve, what I really appreciate from visiting other carnivals is the kind of pan-Caribbean experience, or seeing so many different islands come together, even though it might not be your carnival, but hearing everybody's music, hearing all the different accents, or, just seeing how different people, express themselves in their own individual carnival, but in different spaces. For me, I would personally want to see more of that because I think, the music would evolve even further or would have even more of I don't know. I don't know the exact word I'm looking for, but I think, the fact that there's so many of us that come together in this space, when we celebrate or, pay reverence for our history, I feel like, the more we respect each other's culture and countries and, see what we could borrow from each other to build on that. For me, that's what I'm most intrigued by seeing, like whether it's from a music perspective, whether it is, a band from Guadeloupe come to Trinidad and they bring, their celebration and show us how they do it in Guadeloupe, or we go to, Grenada and, we see how we could exchange. Like even this year and last year, there was a group that came from Grenada and they collaborated with a Paramin Blue Devil group and they had a juve. I'm excited by those kinds of exchanges, essentially. I hope that answered your question. I know I went all around and I came
No,
back.
no, it more than did. Thank you. I mean, and I think you've made some really interesting points there about the reverence, but also appreciating the value of, I guess, hybridization and the collaboration between, I guess, other communities and maybe other parts of the Caribbean. I'd like to open the same.
Sorry.
Sorry. No, go ahead.
I was going to say we're already so separate by water and like we can't always access each other, as easily. I feel like just culturally, I just seeing that happen, I feel like that would even probably make those aspects of our exchange easier. Maybe we might have more ferries, maybe we might have cheaper flights, and maybe it might be easier for us to do these things collaboratively when we see, we do it on a smaller level.
Yeah. Thank you. I wanted to open the same question to the rest of our panelists. So again, maybe what do you see also as maybe the most significant developments in Carnival today, either locally, based on I guess where you are at the moment, the UK, and transnationally, and also how do you see Carnival practices maybe evolving whilst maintaining cultural meaning? Do you think that's possible? Marva, do you want to? Yeah, you're muted. Sorry.
Yeah,
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay.
I think with the carnival practices, there needs to be, I will say, we need to do research. We need to gather information. We need to record and document because we've accepted carnival as it is. And today, well, from last year, we could see that there's been that change. It's the storytelling, the history, and how important it is to share that knowledge. And through Shari, she was able to do this. But what it is when she goes, who can we get in London to support or continue that development? So what I'm looking at, or what I wanted to see, is how do we record the histories here? How do we document them? How do we tell more stories? And what I want to let people know, every year, groups have a theme. They choose a traditional, fun, fancy, contemporary theme, and they have to go and research it. but a lot of the times, sometimes it's impossible to research a theme because there's no information, there's no history. So what we do, sometimes we're guessing what it is. So what we need to do is have more research in place. And at the moment I would say in London, Carnival is just a festival. So therefore, it's not that important. But what we're trying to say, Carnival is not a festival. It's a heritage. It's a legacy. It's a development of the art form, how it's evolved and changed. And until I went on holiday to Grenada, when I saw Jab Jab, I would run away from it because I didn't understand what it actually meant. And working with Shari, and I got more interested in the character's tradition. And the work is the same as how we do costumes here. So why can't we share it a bit more? And what it is, it's not that scary because it does look scary, but there's a lot of fun behind history of what's been developed and captured.
Yeah, thank you. Corrina, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I won't say too much because I'm not carnivalist, but obviously we work to support and advocate for the works of, say, Tropical Isles and the 17 other stakeholder groups that we have here in Hackney. And times are tough, money is dwindling, and this is across the whole of the UK. So what we will see is the necessity of being innovative and coming together and being resilient against the fact that there is a significant drop in the amount of funding that we can provide for Carnival. I mean, every year when Notting Hill comes up, every year it's a conversation of can they afford to do it again? I know that's what we have here, conversations in the council as well, but we do have we still will always reserve a significant amount of funding to support Carnival Arts in Hackney in some form, in some way. And we will do that by communication and working together and working with our Carnival groups to see what it is that they want to do and how they best want to be represented and how best they can work together. And we essentially are here just to facilitate those conversations and make sure that they have the autonomy to deliver Carnival in the way that they think is genuine. We had a really beautiful exhibition at the Hackney Museum last year, which documented the history of Hackney Carnival in all its iterations since the 70s. And I think reflecting on the general narrative of that exhibition was resilience, because we have had so many different iterations of Hackney Carnival. It's been Hackney One Carnival, it's been Carnival Roadshow, different names, but essentially the essence has always still been there, in that these carnival groups are passionate and talented and want to come together to celebrate their culture. And so much as I don't know how much people know about the history of Hackney here over the last 30, 40, 50 years, but despite all the economic difficulties, it has still managed to deliver in some way. So that spirit is there. And us as council members, we just want to be able to support that with the dwindling money that we have. But it's important that councils across the UK realise how important it is to support that heritage, because it is so important to our borough. So yeah, it's a difficult one. It's a difficult time, but the history has said that it will still sustain in some way, some form, because of people's talent and resilience.
So, yes, and I think, go ahead, Marva,
sorry. I just wanted to say from Corrina's feedback that Hackney is one of the most, I would say, exciting boroughs for Carnival, especially when it comes to visitors, the work that we do, and the whole idea of we have a place We have a place in London. We have a place internationally. We had over 8,000 visitors coming to see our event. So that we are doing something right.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to mention that we are
Yeah.
doing something right through our workshops, the delivery, the programming, and the activities. And it's not just about Notting Hill. After Notting Hill, everybody is excited to come, take part, or watch Hackney Carnival.
And just to say it's the 60th anniversary of Notting Hill this year, and I really hope that there is programming around that as a national event that starts now, so that people can understand why Notting Hill exists and what the complexity of history is, and can really understand it and enjoy it and appreciate it and maintain it here in the UK.
Okay. Rosie, I also wanted to hear your thoughts a little bit about what you see, I guess the role of Carnival, how it's evolving, and uh, the need also to maintain, I guess, cultural authenticity, and how do you see this playing out in the future?
I guess from a cinema perspective, what was amazing about that event was that it wasn't just a screening, it was everything. It was the whole community coming in, and taking over the whole venue. So, I mean, I hope in terms of my practice and in terms of the way we program the Rio, we can continue to have the community coming in and taking over in that kind of way, and it being about people meeting together and kind of being there for Hackney. And I think that kind of audience development where you are kind of culturally as a venue, kind of handing power over to people who have more knowledge and who can curate what needs to be curated rather than you dictating it too much, is what I would want to do. I always hope that the cinema can be here. I know there's less funding for Carnival at the moment, and there's a lot of discussion about that in Hackney at the moment. And I hope that the Rio will always be able to provide a space. Obviously, you can't have Carnival at the Rio, but we can do programming that still honors that stuff, you know. And I think that intergenerational thing, we're doing more and more kind of work with young audiences at the Rio at the moment. It's something that we've just started to build up again in the last year or so. And for me, you know, I have a 4-year-old son. Hannah's kids were there as well. Corrina brought her little boy, and it was just really nice for all of three of us to see our children running around, being in this space. You know, I take Jonah to Carnival, and he loves it, and they do Carnival at his school. And yeah, kind of for me, like as somebody, I've lived in Hackney for 20 years, as someone who lives in Hackney and now is running a cultural venue here, like, um, I guess I can't speak from an expert position of what the future of Carnival is. That would be crazy. But I can tell you what my hope is, which is just that, you know, we continue that kind of collaboration. Because I sensed something very good happening last year at the Rio. I hope we can do it again. Especially the kind of the intergenerational aspect. That was incredible.
Yeah. Thank you, Rosie. I mean, I think it's really, sorry, Sherry, you want to?
But no, you could go ahead. I can mention what I was gonna say after. Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to just say that it seems like one of the roles of this of local cultural spaces, of community spaces, of cinemas, is to also bring that knowledge and that history and that opportunity for people to learn and interact with it outside of
Absolutely.
the main kind of event or carnival event itself. Because,
Yeah.
you know, Notting Hill Carnival, I guess Hackney Carnival are getting more bigger, more commercialized, more funding, more sponsors. And to an extent, when events and cultural events become part of this system, some part of it, in terms of its history as well as tradition, sometimes become eroded, and it starts to become more of a celebration. And I wonder, I guess, to what extent, and it seems like it is playing a big role, it potentially has a big role to play, cultural spaces and all these other events that are organized
Mhm.
around it, to make sure that audiences, and especially local audiences, understand the significance, the history, the knowledge, the traditions, and to bring in experts and to bring in people like Shari from the Caribbean who are part of that living history that is still being made. I
Yeah.
think that is incredibly important for especially younger generation, but all generations, because we can all relate to, to those spaces. Shari.
No, that was pretty much what I was gonna say, because somebody mentioned that also in the chat, Elise, about, exchange, not, I mean, yes, a filmmaker, they exchange too, but, other mass makers and seeing how they, go about creating, their more contemporary versions of mass, or, kings and queens of carnivals who have like carnival, who have like huge costumes, all those things. Like imagine like, people more exchange from our islands in spaces like the diaspora, that's from the source in terms of like that knowledge exchange too. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, it's been really great to hear from all of you and your different perspectives and experiences. So I'm just looking at time. So what I propose to do now, Shari, tell me if this is okay to share one of your new movies, new shorts, before we take audience questions. Is that okay?
And we said we go until what time? How much more time do we have?
The event is until 4:30, so we've got, I think, enough time even to play the whole clip. Is about
Yeah.
12. Yeah. Do you want to introduce the work before I share it?
Sure. So what you're gonna see soon is a project I've been developing for a couple of years now. It's actually a proof of concept for a TV series, and the name of it is called Just Irie. If for those who don't know, Irie, that's like our indigenous name for Trinidad and Tobago. So that's why I called it Just Irie, and it has a lot to do with music in Trinidad, and it follows like a young DJ, a woman, navigating this space and the music world and Trinidad and the Caribbean in general. But for now, you're just going to see a 12 minutes proof of concept of what the overall project is going to be.
Okay. All right.
I don't know how much of a lag that was, if there was a lag for peeps, but thanks for watching Just Irie, and for the claps and the what you call those? Confetti.
Thank you, Shari. I wasn't sure whether everybody was having the same issue. That's why I asked mid-clip whether everybody could hear.
I heard it fine, but I saw a lag throughout,
okay.
but maybe other people saw it fine.
All right. Well, thank you for allowing us to share that with everybody, Shari, your latest work. So I guess now at this point, I wanted to maybe take some questions from the audience. I'm going to check the chat, but whether there's anything at the moment. Let me see. All right. So we have one question. Let me see. I guess you've already answered this, but can you detail the films shown at the Rio? Do you want to remind the audience what the films were?
Yeah, at the Rio, we showed Mass Prep Mukojambi, Mass Prep Blue Devil, Mass Prep Jamalasi, and we showed Fantastic Friday, Mass Prep Stick Fighter, Mass Prep Dragon, and King Carnival by Horace Ove. So we had an intermission because there's a lot of we had an intermission, but that was the lineup at that time. But for Trinidad, I did Mass Prep Baby Doll, which you all haven't seen yet in London. I did Just Irie, Mass Prep Stick Fighter, Mass Prep Dragon, and Carnival Fantastique, and also Lost Tribe Island Circus, which is a traditional a band in Trinidad, not a traditional band, but a contemporary band. But they don't use beads and feathers; they do more cloth and other material in general to bring forth their mass.
All right. Thank you. Hannah, I think your hand up.
Yeah, but I just saw this question. I think it was also earlier in the chat about the impact of the recent changes in visa requirements, and I think that's a really important one to probably touch on first.
Yeah. And I personally was impacted last time I came to the UK because previously, for the past 3 years or so, it's been free movement. Like whenever I'm in another country, it's easy for me to just go to the UK. But for, that Rio screening, a lot of paperwork, a lot of, extra money that needed to be spent. So hopefully that's not something that, stays around too long, because I find that definitely was a hindrance in getting to where I needed to be. And, thankfully I could afford to get to where I need to be, but that might not always be the case, for everybody else. So just in general, it just makes it more difficult for these kind of cultural exchanges, artistic exchanges, to happen. Yeah.
Yeah. Corrina and Rosie, have you also seen this impact maybe with people you've collaborated with, artists that you're inviting to come?
Not yet, but
Not
that's
yet.
not to say that things aren't. It is something that we think about in terms of cultural climate and what's happening in terms of people coming and going. But I work very specifically. Basically, we tend to look and support artists that are within Hackney. And the programming. So, for example, we didn't reach directly out to Shari. This was all down to the brilliant programming from Hannah and then Marva and then Rosie bringing it in. So, again, as a council, we kind of facilitate other people's ideas. So, we are braced for these conversations that we will be having with programmers going forward. And yeah, we're braced.
I would say it hasn't impacted us in a big way, but we've definitely had a few panels where guests haven't been able to make it or their travel plans have been disrupted if they've been going through the States. We show quite a lot of political work at the Rio, and it's always tended to be panelists speaking after more political documentaries who suddenly have to attend by Zoom. Yeah, it's a weird climate to be operating in, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just the UK, but it's also what's going on in the US, because a lot of people have to go through the US
Exactly.
in order to be able to
Yeah.
come to the UK. So it's
Yeah.
something that is wider, I guess.
Yeah.
There's another question regarding whether or not you know about any other independent UK cinemas that have done anything equivalent to this series. Yes, Shari?
In 2024, when I was in the UK for summer again for Notting Hill Carnival, well, a little before Notting Hill Carnival, I spent like 2 months there. That's actually when I did the residency at Oxford Brookes, where I was actually editing some of the mashup episodes even. So that, that residency for me was very beneficial because it gave me time and space to like think and, develop the work further. But during that time, there was another screening by Minute Shorts called Days Before Carnival, and my film was part of the lineup, but the other films were from the UK. So Notting Hill Carnival, and well, mine was Trinidad. I don't think I saw any other islands. I think it was more like regional, like different parts of the UK and their different carnivals. And I think there was maybe one archival film. That was one in terms of, and then there was a smaller or shorter screening. I'm trying to remember the name of it, but Notting Hill Gate. I showed Fantastic Friday, but there was also Queen, No Soca, No Life by Kevin Adams, and I think 2 other Trinidadian films during that time. Those are the only 2 other instances that I remember clearly, like where like a cinema would have facilitated people coming with screening with films.
Okay.
There may be others, but that's personally the ones I remember or was a part of.
Yeah. Corrina and Rosie, I don't know if you know of any others having similar initiatives.
I don't. I believe this event was fairly unique in that it brought in all of these other elements of DJs and food and the kind of intergenerational focus. But I am aware, I've been programming for a long time of short documentaries usually about carnivals screening as part of larger shorts packages or that kind of thing. I'm sure they would do something like that at the Watershed in Bristol. There's a big carnival in Bristol, obviously. Hannah would know more about this than me, actually.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I mean, even at the event, there were guests who kind of thought back to previous initiatives throughout, I believe it was end of the 90s until 2000s. At the Tabernacle, there used to be a film screening series, I think every month throughout the year dedicated to Carnival, which was organized by a Masband. So it's kind of where we were even talking about how this could inspire people to probably pick up similar projects again. But again, it's not a cinema, it's not the cinema space itself. The tabernacle is so many things, and can be used as a site for screenings as well. So it's a bit different in that regard.
So yeah, even these 2 screenings I mentioned, it was more so people came with their work and, they were facilitated as opposed to a cinema, more so taking charge of how it is displayed and making it a major part of their event or program and marketing it as such too. Because that was a major part of it too. I felt like I didn't have to do all the work myself as a filmmaker. I felt that there was support in terms of helping with graphics, helping with getting the word out there, which is something that when you're not making a film on the Hollywood budget level, these people take these things for granted, but that's money. Somebody has to do the graphic design, somebody has to print posters, somebody has to do somebody has to do a trailer, all these things, and that takes up a major part of a marketing budget for a film.
Yeah.
I'll just add to that so when looking, if anybody here is looking to do some research as to where else this kind of stuff has happened, my advice would be to look for independent film programmers as opposed to the actual cinemas, because that's where the work's happening. So there are fantastic collectives here in the UK that take this work upon themselves to go to cinemas and approach people like Rosie and say, "Oh, we've got this great idea." And one of the beautiful things about the Rio is that it opens up conversations to those programmers and that's how independent cinemas get such great diverse programming, by looking to the community, looking to groups that have that inside knowledge and that information and the access to those lesser known films that might not even necessarily have a distributor. So yeah, there's a lot of grassroots organizations. I mean, off the top of my head, we are Parable here in the UK, Python TV, Tape Collective.
That's where I personally see some of the best films. They really they don't see someone as a non-Hollywood filmmaker and think, oh, it's not valuable. Actually, when I go to those type of screenings or engage with those spaces, I get to see films from filmmakers I might never even know about, but because they care enough about bringing independent filmmakers up, now I know that this exists, and now this is another person that I could call to if I want to bring something like that to Trinidad or anywhere else in the world. So that especially what I appreciate about those kinds of spaces. There's no, oh, you're not too big for this. It's more like, actually no, what you're doing is already valuable, and eventually people might notice it when you become whatever you need to become. But for right now, let's facilitate this. Let's make this happen.
There's one more question about how the audience can contact the speakers today and the organizers. So I mean, and Hannah, maybe I'd pass this question on to you.
Yes, absolutely. We will share the contact for the network, and I will just get in touch with all the speakers and make sure everyone is okay to share the emails, and then we can, if you get in touch with the network, we can then share the email contacts. I do think there will be more opportunities to get together and continue the conversation. Can I just add one comment and a question? First of all, thank you so much, Shari, for sharing this, the proof of concept. And it was just so wonderful to see. We've talked about it before, and just to see it now. And what I just noticed, what also came up in the discussion before, is this fluidity between different music genres, different spaces, and how all of this kind of contributes to that wider, almost like an ecosystem where carnival mass is not extracted as a singular kind of, as one art form, but is situated, and it's situated in different practices, different music genres, different also communities and overlaps of that. And I think that is just where this is so beautiful with mass and movies, how that event format allows this to happen, where these different elements, where there's not this division between this is traditional mass or this is pretty mass, or because you've worked on a lot on that as well, where there is a space for that, or Fantastic Friday, a fictional setting that still has the traditional mass in the streets happening on the road there as part of it and integrated into the story. So I just love to see that. My question was coming back, and it made me think when we're talking about visa requirements, mobility, that exchange that is so necessary, but then kind of hindered. And what you said about geo blockage of films and the archive, the access to the archive. What role you see in digital media platforms and sharing your work, because I know Masband was available the first couple of episodes on YouTube.
Yes.
But what difficulties does that also bring as a filmmaker and as a creative to use these platforms, make it accessible? But on the other hand, I guess it's difficult to navigate that accessibility.
So in terms of the accessibility, it's like the reason why I don't have all on YouTube anymore, and I just have two. I mean, I never had all, but I have them unlisted, but I have the first two public. Well, number one, people started stealing my footage and promoting their events with it, or like adding it into things without my permission, and that ended up being like very exhausting to deal with. But also, also thinking about how can I, recoup funds if it's just on YouTube at the same time. So, having screenings is another way for me to get more funds so I can make more work and actually like invest more into packaging the work even better. So that's why, it hasn't been completely online. And well, Quality TV, which, is a streaming platform for films from the African diaspora and Africa, they've been supporting my work since my very first, major documentary called Sophie. And I've had my films on their platform. And that's another way that I make some kind of revenue from work. But, it's still not always on the largest scale. But that's another, thing I'm currently actually thinking about more ways to get people to watch the work without me putting it fully on YouTube, because people have been asking, how they can stream it, where can they see it. So right now I'm just figuring out where I can post it where people can't download it and do whatever they want with it. But still, it's affordable enough for people to see it and also for me to, recoup or to be able to run a business essentially and not just have my films out there for free completely. Even though I would love that, but, if people weren't taking the work, that would have been easier for it to be on a platform freely. But that's the thing that I have to protect myself from. I can't remember if it was a two-part question. Oh, but I also love what you mentioned about music, because actually one of the songs in Just Ari is from the UK. It's a song called Spiral by Theon Cross, and he's like a really brilliant tuba jazz musician in general, whose music I've always been, inspired by and loved his music, even as a group member of Sons of Kemet. And his music is very Caribbean sounding because his family is from St. Lucia. So even that's something that I seek out. Like, I use a lot of Caribbean music and Trinidadian music, but, the diaspora and people who are tapping back into our culture and like really making interesting sounds with what already exists or building on that, I'm intrigued by. And Just Irie is going to have a lot of that, going on, like music where you hear it and it's like, is this person from Trinidad? It's like, oh no, they're not. Or they may be. Or, you just get to explore and discover some new words. But yeah, geo-blocking is definitely a huge issue. Been an issue my entire life, because even since I was a teen, I was always on YouTube looking at archives, looking at, the oldest footage I could find of Trinidad and Tobago, like just for my general intrigue. But then there were films that I would come across that I could never watch, and still to this day haven't watched because, it's blocked to a certain region, or, even if I could afford to pay it, or like even if I have a VPN, sometimes it's even more difficult to access this work. And I feel like, even though I understand it from a contractual standpoint, as a filmmaker, you sign contracts and there's distribution in different parts of the world. So obviously they have to honor where they show the work. But at the same time, kind of blocking information from the world, from people in general. And, if I never get to see this, then there's this information I might never get ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. And somebody asked another question about packaging and mixing documentary with narrative. That was something that I thought about that I was not necessarily anxious about, but I thought about it. I'm like, I wonder if our audience in terms of Trinidad might, how they might feel in terms of like seeing more of a mix as opposed to just watching one narrative film when you go to the movie theater, or watching something that's, a mix of narrative and documentary, and sometimes not even exactly that narrative or documentary, something a little bit in between. And thankfully, it was well received. And a lot of people actually came up to me and were like, we need to see this exact lineup of films again. And I didn't think that people would actually say that clearly, if that makes sense, because I feel like people don't think about curation as a consumer. People don't think about curation as much unless you're in curation or you're in film or in arts. So I feel like, that I had a positive response, especially for this current lineup. And even putting together the lineup, things were kind of falling into place unexpectedly. Like things were linking up. Like I wasn't planning to show at Movie Tongue, but the first film I showed actually has Movie Tongue in it. And then like, some of the films I was watching, like music going into other scenes were linking to what was going on in another film, or somebody's name that was mentioned in one film ended up being mentioned lower down. And certain things weren't planned, but I'm glad it worked out that way and felt cohesive, and people saw it enough, noted it enough to mention it or want more of something like that.
Thank you, Shari. Thank you, Shari. So I think I'm looking at time, so I think this is, we're coming towards the end of our time. Before I pass this on to Hannah, I think, Hannah Yinin, you want to introduce maybe the next event in this series of Creative Industries Festival. But I wanted to thank all the panelists, especially Shari, for sharing your work, sharing your stories, sharing your knowledge, but all of our panelists and our audience members as well for asking questions and being part of this, I think, really important conversation about Carnival. Carnival that is not just a celebration, but it's also memories, creativity, it's community, its resistance, and also the role that cinemas and cultural spaces play in all of this. So thank you very much, everybody, for contributing. So I'm going to pass to the mic to Hannah.
Thank you, Rosa, and thank you for chairing so brilliantly as well. And I'm just going to endorse and second Rosa's thanks to all the speakers. It really was a tremendous panel. So yeah, Rosa's just passed to me to say that we have our final online event of the festival in half an hour, well, in just over half an hour at 5 o'clock. We have Hollywood screenwriter Eitan Marciano dialing in from LA to talk about mythology coordination and world building and storytelling ecosystems and what Hollywood's really like. So please do stick around or come back. It's on the same link. We're keeping it simple. And that's at 5 o'clock. And then, of course, for those of you who are Oxfordshire based, the festival continues in person on campus from Wednesday to Friday. So my colleagues have put the links in the chat. Please do come and take advantage of all the fabulous events that are coming up.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Most of all.
Thank you.